As a fine connoisseur of beer, I'm going to crack this PBR.
All right.
Oh, that is not tasty. Brad, it is that time again.
It is.
It's time to slap our favorite cartridge in our favorite unnamed system, because it's time for cartridge-based radio.
Sweet.
It, in fact, is sweet. For everyone who's returning, thank you. For everyone who's new, you still have time to go back and listen to the first episode. Unless we've made it like a year, then you might as well not go back. That's the past.
Well, if we're a year in and they're listening to episode number 2, they might as well go back to episode number 1 and finish the collection.
That's true. If you are listening to this show, you're probably someone who's like, man, I love old games, so you probably love old podcasts.
You know, honestly, if you're listening to this show, you're probably really, really proud of your son and his friend for doing this podcast.
Or you're like, oh, those kids, I'm not going to listen to another episode. How was your week?
Busy. Somebody decided that one of the topics for this week's show should be Grand Theft Auto 3, and I dusted it off just to give myself a quick refresher on it, and ended up playing the heck out of it all week. So we got that to talk about later in the show. I know it's not our primary topic, but yeah, I was actually off work this week, but ended up spending a lot of that downtime playing that old game.
I'm sure your wife appreciated that.
Kept me out of her hair.
But as you mentioned, that is later in the show where we will debate whether Grand Theft Auto 3 is still a quality game. But first, let's get into our important major topic that is on the forefront of everyone's mind. Lara Croft, international criminal. Discuss.
Okay. Here's the first thing I want to know. Why is it a surprise that in a game that's called Tomb Raider, that the main character, who is a Tomb Raider, is maybe not a responsible archaeologist? Like, we seem surprised by this. You know, we sit back and we think about, like, wow, she actually, like, commits a lot of crimes and, like, destroys a lot of artifacts and things, but it's a game called Tomb Raider. We should have expected that. If you played a game called Meth Dealer, and then we're like, man, that guy sure, like, sold a lot of meth and, like, hurt a bunch of people, like, that's kind of what you would expect. But yeah, you and I both, and, you know, other people that I've heard discuss this topic in the past, seem surprised that it was like we bought a game called Responsible Archaeologist, and then this is what we got, and we were surprised. You know, the reaction maybe, it's not consistent with what we were actually presented with, which is a game called Tomb Raider, where you go in and rob old tombs of their artifacts for profit, mostly to sell to rich people on the black market. Maybe we shouldn't be so surprised that Lara might actually be the villain.
There's a lot to unpack in this topic. First and foremost is, yes, she often goes to foreign countries and just goes into tombs, which, from what I understand, you can't just do. You usually have to get permission from the local government, but she's like, I just punched through the roof of this tomb. We're going. And then you start digging through the tomb. Everything's fine. But for some reason, the tombs are full of mercenaries or the local people who are like, you got to stop desecrating our sacred ground. And she's like, well, I have permits. And they're like, you don't have permits. And then she pulls out 2 9mm and just smokes them.
She's like, I got 2 permits. And they're like, well, they're very nice, but that doesn't mean you can just... And she's like, no, these. And she shoots them.
I think after you shoot someone, you stop and you reflect on a couple things in your life. Like, you just shot somebody in an ancient tomb. Yes, there's dead people in the ancient tombs, but you just made new dead people in the ancient tomb.
It is kind of a jump. I remember a couple months ago, I watched Home Alone again for the first time since I was a little kid and it first came out. Joe Pesci and the other guy, the Wet Bandits, go from like trying to rob this house and like waiting till Christmas when no one's around so they don't have to hurt anybody, and they're very careful. And all of a sudden they go from that to like, we're going to murder this 10-year-old, and like it's like a snap decision. Like they just go from like quiet burglary to child murder in an instant. And that's kind of the way it feels with Tomb Raider, where it's like you're desecrating tombs and stealing artifacts, and then all of a sudden you just like up and start killing people.
And then you don't seem to face any sort of repercussion for it, because maybe the authorities don't know where the tomb is, so they don't know where the bodies are hidden. But she just goes home to her fancy mansion, and she's walking around. That weird butler guy's following her, and he's probably like, "Ma'am, did you shoot anyone in the head?" And she's, one or...
Well, it was mostly in the body.
What? One or two, no big deal, right? And he's like, "Oh, ma'am." Her crimes are not limited to in the tomb. I mean, in the tomb is bad. We don't know how the mercenaries found, like, the end chamber of the tomb, and she had to work her way through them. That's no big deal. But she committed other crimes, such as just out in the open. Like, driving down the waterways of Vienna, shooting each other, or shooting people from the back of a boat. That could not go unnoticed.
Was that the Venice level?
Yeah, Tomb Raider 2.
Okay, so that's Italy. So that's, Law and Order out there is probably not what it is in, like, a developed country.
Did you just throw a lot of shade on Italy?
I'm just saying, like, it seems like the kind of country where if you had an enemy, you could maybe, like, give the cop, like, $20 and be like, frame that person for murder, and they would do it.
Okay, I mean, that is fair, but she is just driving down the waterway, shooting pistols at other people, and some of those have got to go stray. There had to be like a rash of bullets flying through windows.
Probably. Lara Croft really likes shooting up Italy.
Right?
Because there's that Venice level. There was a Rome level that was in one of the later games that I played on Dreamcast. And like that one, you have to open up a church or something, and you do it by just shooting the bell of the church. Like after you've run around the streets of Rome and like murdered a bunch of people and their dogs, you then start shooting church bells to get the door to open. I don't remember which one in the series it was, but it must have been about maybe Last Revelation or the one that came after that, because it was on the Dreamcast, so that's not like a big window of time that game could have been released.
And when she's out in the open or in cities or whatnot, she keeps finding treasures there too. And if you really stop and think about that, what she's doing is going in other people's houses and sees a family heirloom, and she's like, "Oh, a treasure for me," and just it's burglary. She robs people, walks out of their house, and if they try to stop her, they're like, "She's probably going to shoot us because she just shot those 8 guys out front."
Oh, this treasure is right next to this first aid kit that just has been laying here. Right behind... It was in a secret compartment hidden behind a mirror in this old-time bathroom with modern fixtures.
"Oh, ma'am, did you just take my asthma inhaler?" She's like, "Yes, what of it?" I guess enjoy.
This is half a life bar for me, kid. I need this. I've been fighting dogs and mercenaries all day.
That's my entire life bar, ma'am. Please leave it.
I remember Tomb Raider 2, there's at least one, and I want to say multiple levels that take place on an oil rig, where you're just like running around like shooting the people working on the oil rig, finding treasure, and exploring this, hidden, mysterious industrial oil extraction platform. Kind of undermines some of the sense of discovery and exploration that you got in some of the other levels.
If you think about it really hard, if you murder everyone at a location, it suddenly becomes a tomb. So she's raiding it and making it a tomb at the same time.
I suppose it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy that way.
Someone murdered everyone on this oil rig. Sir, don't you mean tomb?
2,000 years from now, they'll be like, we'll never fully understand the ancient burial rites of these oil platform people because some Tomb Raider came and just disturbed their final resting place.
Disturbed, created, semantics. She has committed many, many open crimes, and I don't know British law very well since I'm not a British lawyer anymore. They have to have some sort of, Egypt could call them and say, hey, one of your citizens came over here, murdered 47 people, robbed one of the pyramids, and then left on an airplane without any sort of flight plan. Can you send her back, please? And I guess the British government would be like, yeah, we probably could accommodate you with that.
I think the British government would probably just be like, well, historically, that's what our citizens do to Egypt. That's why we have all these cool mummies in our museums and you don't.
Yeah, they call and make that request, and Britain's like, nah, we're good. She just sold all that stuff on the black market, and it looks really good next to my fireplace.
She's not just some random British citizen. She's very rich. And, I think probably the times have changed in the last couple hundred years, but still, she's probably part of the nobility, and she probably can eat orphans for dinner if she wanted, and...
The butler's like, where did you get this food, ma'am? Well, there was a tomb at an orphanage.
The series is really just sort of a commentary on imperialism that we sort of looked over the entire time, but it makes more sense now.
We're having fun doing backflips and shooting endangered wolves in the face, so...
Speaking of endangered wildlife...
The most endangered wildlife...
A wildlife that hasn't ever been seen alive in any human's lifetime. There are dinosaurs in the first Tomb Raider.
There are little dinosaurs, and then there is a T-Rex. I guess you'd consider it a boss fight, but she didn't stop to think, I could bring people here and show them this magnificent creature that hasn't been seen for billions of years. No, instead, she just locks and loads and shoots it in the face.
She's like, I bet I could shoot that a whole bunch of times.
And then she just leaves the corpse. She's like, I gotta get out of here because I found this necklace and people want to buy this necklace. Not thinking, hey, someone might want to buy the corpse of a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
That would probably raise more questions like, did you kill a T-Rex, you idiot?
I would be the first question I asked. But the British government been like, well, it's not a British Tyrannosaurus Rex, so we're okay with that. I think there is one where you break into a party in England to get something from someone and it ends up in a gunfight. I'm pretty sure that's in one of them. Yeah, that was in the Xbox graphic buff up one. I forget. Those older Tomb Raiders are starting to get a little blurry. I played some of the first one, and boy, gameplay wise, that's way rough there.
Yeah, everything is kind of done on a grid, and they try to hide it a little bit, but all the maps, it's you can jump exactly one square. If you have a running start, you can jump 3 squares. Everything is just built out of it. It's like a Minecraft level with better textures.
I could argue the better textures thing.
Some of the mods available for Minecraft.
The swimming's a nightmare too.
Yeah.
Pre-analog stick is just it's scary rough.
Time. And one of my phobias is drowning in one of those situations where you're just sort of trapped and you can't get out. So the swimming in that game just is difficult and freaks me out, and I don't like it. It's not a terrible game. I mean, it's easy to say, well, for its time, and it's definitely dated, but even now, it still does some things well. The first one especially, there's a feeling when you go into these tombs and whatnot where it really feels like you're the first person who's ever been there, until you get into a gunfight. But there is a feeling of exploration that I get when I play that. When I play Super Metroid is kind of that same feeling. Something that the later Metroid games kind of got away from, where you're going to a base that's already full of space pirates and science and, computer screens telling you what everything is. So that's kind of neat. You don't play a ton of games where you really feel like you're discovering something for the first time. So that's kind of cool. But it's not a game that I really want to go back and play a whole bunch. I picked it up on sale for the PS3 download at some point, and it's just kind of on my hard drive, not getting played very much.
Yeah, the new ones they made, those are pretty decent. And they actually agree with us. They dive into the the first time she kills someone, she does not handle it well in that game. Which I really thought was a neat little touch they did, because if she looks at her storied past, she is straight up psychopath.
Absolutely. I think the one thing with the reboot is early on she's killing people and she's like, oh God, and this is disturbing to me. And then you kill 50 people and she's still like, oh, what have I become? And oh, this is upsetting. And after a while you get into a gunfight with an entire army at one point. It feels like, I was going through, I think, a radio tower or something and killed tons of people, and she's still like, oh, my fragile young mind. And it's like, it's been 60 people over the last 3 days, lady.
Can you avoid fights in that game? Because if you can, then that's just a comment on the player, not her as a character.
I honestly don't remember.
Because if you can avoid the fights, it's not her who's getting into these gunfights to murder for murder's sake, it's you.
Well, nevertheless, I feel like my character should reflect those tendencies. It wouldn't be hard to...
So, first it's like, oh no, I murdered someone. Then by the 60th, they're like, yeah, I got this. Don't even worry about it.
It wouldn't be hard to put a little counter in the game, and when it gets over a certain number of kills, they just stop playing the I'm upset by this visual cue or vocal cues.
She just takes some blood and paints under her eyes like an NFL player. It's starts talking about the lust for more.
Far Cry is kind of the same way, where at least with Far Cry 3, you start out as kind of this, naive, spoiled 20-something-year-old, and when you're first killing people and stuff, you're all, I'm having a panic attack. And later in the game, you're just hunting and you skin an animal, and this is the 100th animal you've skinned, and you're still like, ugh, this is gross. You're wearing an outfit made out of dead endangered species. You're carrying around a bazooka on your back in a little pouch that's made out of rhinoceros. You're probably over your phobia of skinning animals at that point.
Basically, this talk about Tomb Raider can bleed into every single game, where anything you ever do in a game, you were pretty much just the worst criminal. But you're framed in such a way that you are to be told that you are the hero of the game.
The game never really comes out and does anything to portray you in a heroic way. You're a mercenary Tomb Raider. You're in the employ of this mysterious corporation or whatever that wants some powerful artifact. You're just like, yeah, sure, evil corporation, I'll go get that thing for you. I don't know what it does. I'm sure it'll be fine. You're never really, there's no reason to ever think you're the good guy. And I don't know if it's just a matter of this was 1996. There weren't very many games out where you played as a evil character at that point. Even 3 years later, a game called Driver came out where you were a getaway driver for crime, and they still had to kind of add a little backstory, but you're actually an undercover cop. Just maybe it wasn't a thing back then. Maybe because there wasn't that precedent. Just simply by being the protagonist, it's assumed that you're the hero, no matter how many awful things you do.
You think when she blew up the hole in the side of the Great Wall of China, she would have looked back and went, "Oh yes, I am the villain. I murdered the dragon inside the wall and then blew it up. I think I just left a hole open in the wall for Mongolia." I mean, that war's been over, but that wall has never been breached, and she comes along, steals a dagger from inside it, and blows a hole in it.
I'm sure the Chinese were probably not super happy about that.
Well, we're very unhappy, but she is the hero in this story, so what can we do?
How many of the Tomb Raider games have you played? And I know they all kind of start to blur after a while.
So I'm very sure 1, 2, and 3. Because I was very let down by 3. I remember that at the time, because later I read that, it actually did get rushed to completion, and it really showed. But I have played, is it Angel of Darkness?
That was a Tomb Raider game.
I played that one. I got like $2 on Steam. It's like, this seems like the appropriate price. And then the first reboot, but I haven't got around to the second reboot yet.
Okay. I played the first one, which I liked. I played the second one, which I was a little disappointed in. It was fine, but I had really enjoyed the first one. The second one was okay. Skipped a bunch of them, and then I played a couple of the Dreamcast ones very briefly because for a while I was doing a Dreamcast website, and I felt obligated to play them, and I regretted it immensely. Didn't get very far in any of them. And then there was one where you drive a forklift at one point, and I definitely played the forklift driving one. I played the remake of the first one, which was nice. And then I played the reboot, which was okay, but I think by the end I was kind of just playing to get it over with.
Yeah, that's kind of how I felt about the reboot. The reboot started really, really strong, and then by the end, like you said, it's kind of just let's get to the end.
Yeah, sometimes games don't realize when they're over.
I like a game that knows what it's doing.
Tomb Raider is not one of those games where when you're done, you kind of sit there like, what am I going to do with my life now? It's not like XCOM was for me, where it's like, well, I just did that for 3 months straight, and how am I going to fill this hole in my life that was being filled with XCOM?
The first Tomb Raider, what I appreciated about it most was you fought a lot of animals in that one, and humans really didn't come into play that much. But that second one, they took her outdoors and said, "Go forth and murder my daughter."
It is definitely a tonal shift, and not just the larger impact of killing humans as opposed to animals, but just that there were so many humans around. It really it was a different atmosphere. You're not just, I'm Indiana Jones and I found this place that, is undisturbed and now I'm going to raid the heck out of it. It's just like, hey, I'm in this guy's house and I'm going to shoot him.
Really, not much has changed because Uncharted is still doing the exact same thing. But it kind of does it with a tongue in a cheek, and it's like, yeah, we know he's murdering everyone. You seem to be okay with it, so we're going to give you what you want. I guess what we're saying is, yes, Lara Croft is an international criminal, but we're okay with it?
Yeah. I guess that's probably about as good of a segue as we could probably have into our second segment of the show.
Yes, where we discover that just about everyone in the world, according to sales numbers, is okay with being a murderer and getting away with it. Again, we enter into the head versus heart debate, where you're going to tell me that Grand Theft Auto 3 is still a quality product, and I'm not going to believe you.
Yes, I am. Okay, well, I will tell you this much. I had a copy of GTA 3 that I bought off Steam when it was on sale for $5 maybe. And I finally got around to playing it to kind of refresh myself for this episode. And that was Wednesday, And today, Monday night, I have unlocked all 3 islands. I have about 10 missions to go in the entire game. I've done all the fire truck missions. I've done all the police chase missions. I have had a heck of a lot of fun with this game. And rather than replaying it and realizing that it's not that good, what playing GTA 3 again has made me realize is that 4 and 5 are trash.
I should have booted it up and done a replay, because this one's going to be hard for me. Mostly my complaints are just based around design that I don't find terribly fun anymore, like the unlocking the islands. It's not one big open city from the get-go that lets you do anything you want. I do remember it has an amazing soundtrack. Or did that not survive?
Your memory might be playing tricks with you. The soundtrack is actually kind of hilarious, because it's basically the Scarface soundtrack is one radio station, and then the rest of the radio stations are a bunch of songs that I've never heard anywhere other than Grand Theft Auto 3. I don't think they're real songs. If they were very obscure, and this was supposed to be their big breakthrough, and it just didn't really happen.
You know, actually, I think the Steam version couldn't relicense the original soundtrack from the PS2. You might be hearing a different soundtrack.
I don't know. Maybe, but I kind of remember when Vice City came out, it was sort of a big deal that it was so many licensed songs.
I have the physical copies of 3 and Vice City. Yeah, digital rights changed a lot of things, so there's a chance some of the songs they licensed didn't actually make it into the Steam version.
Could be.
That happens quite often with the transfer over into digital-only games. That's probably something we should have researched, but we're a professional podcast.
Another thing I'll say in favor of GTA 3 is there is a pretty sizable amount of immature humor in it, but there's also some genuinely witty stuff. There's some really funny stuff in that game, especially regarding the radio stations, the way they kind of make fun of themselves. And, you know, it's a good parody of radio, especially what radio was back in 2001. The one station has a contest where they're giving away concert tickets, and it's like, all you have to do is be the 7th caller, and then all the 7th callers will go down to the mall and do gymnastic tricks, and then whoever has the best tricks will go on to nationals, and the winner of nationals will get free concert tickets.
Just the presentation. People with the weird triangle hands and no one's mouth's moving. How's that hold up?
Either they added some animation for the Steam version, or maybe it's not quite as bad as we remember, because the mouths definitely move, except for the main character who never speaks and always just has a look on his face like, can you believe this guy? Which, you know, at times seems pretty appropriate when they're telling you to, like, go drive across the entire city while being chased by the Yakuza and the cops.
I'm going to say something controversial right now. The last good character in a Grand Theft Auto game was that guy.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I know it's the kind of thing that a lot of times when you see a character like this, the fans all complain, well, for the sequel, I don't want him to be a silent protagonist who never talks or says anything. I want, fully... I like the kind of character who doesn't actually talk. I like that in some of the RPGs, in Oblivion. Fallout 3, I think, was that way. The character that doesn't talk, it kind of lets you put yourself in that role a little more, which is nice, and sometimes it's fun to also play a character. But it's also, I think, can be more immersive to just have kind of this blank slate for you to project yourself onto.
I'm supposed to be arguing against this game with some well thought out points, but the more you talk about it and the more I think of the Grand Theft Autos that came after 3, I'm having a harder and harder time saying bad things about this because, that series just has gotten away from everybody. I recently played through Mafia 3, and I believe Mafia 3 might be what Grand Theft Auto's been trying to be for the last decade.
But does it successfully?
Mafia 3 it kind of feels like if GTA 3 grew up to be a big boy game, like a story that makes you think about society and how we treat each other. It does such a good job at just being like, oh, this happened in the 60s, and we're not that far from the 1960s if you think about the scale of time. And if this is how the 1960s were, we have a lot to talk about in this society. I think Grand Theft Auto has gone the opposite direction and said, fart joke.
Somebody at Rockstar played Grand Theft Auto 3 and said, well, this game's really fun, but what makes it fun is that it's super realistic, and we need to just keep upping the realism every game to the point where there should be missions where you drive a forklift or work at the docks or do yoga or go for a job interview, and you can't pass the mission if you don't have the right shoes on. Those are all things that happened in 4 and 5, and they were just terrible. For any flaws it has, it is purely fun. It never ever tries to, it's not super realistic. And it never lets realism get in the way of just doing something kind of fun and crazy. Just driving around the city without even anything to do is a joy. You can run people over and swerve in and out of traffic and jump off things. And you could run over 10 people and they might be like, oh, well, now the cops are going to, if they happen to see you, they might try to stop you, but we're not actually coming after you. And like GTA 4, it's just, you do any kind of crime and it's like, all right, now you have to do this long chase and ditch multiple cops, and it's going to take like 15 minutes because like somebody saw you jack that car.
In Mafia 3, if you steal a car, someone has to run and find a payphone to report you. Then the cops will search the area that they called in, but if you're out of that area, they can't find you. It's pretty neat. I would say that actually Saints Row the Third is the actual sequel to the goofiness of Grand Theft Auto 3. GTA is just not fun anymore.
No, it's work. I mean, some of the missions, they give you real jobs, and it feels like a real job, and playing that game feels like a job.
The latest one, 5, I thought Franklin was the best character, and I couldn't figure out what the other two were doing there.
There was no need for multiple characters.
You damage storytelling if you're trying to split it between 3 characters, that 2 of which I just could not stand at all, and a third one who had trappings around him that just annoyed the crap out of me. 3, it has like technical problems that I would point out in this day and age. Thinking back at it, I had a very good time with 3, and I'm doing a bad job arguing against 3. This is a bad segment for this game, but I imagine we'd get around to the point where one of us couldn't argue against the other one.
Sooner or later, and I guess it's sooner, we're going to pick on a game that we both like or didn't realize that we liked. It's going to be or we're going to find one that we both end up not liking.
Star Fox.
That is on the horizon. That might go poorly. I think if you were to challenge me on my high school appreciation of the Super Star Wars trilogy, I would have a hard time defending those games. GTA 3 is an easy defense. And one other thing about that game is I don't like to brag about my skills in games because I'm mostly a scrub. Win by attrition is usually my tactic for most challenges. Oh, I have more health than that guy. I'll just trade hits with him for a while. Me driving the fire truck in Grand Theft Auto 3 is a thing of beauty. I can corner that thing like a rally car around hairpins. I can cross town in no time, cross 5 lanes of traffic, put out a fire, and keep right on motoring. I might be more skilled at driving the fire truck in GTA 3 than I am at anything else in all
Would you say
games.
that you could easily set it to that opera singing from the Hitman series to make it even more dramatic? Like, there goes Brad in a fire truck. Thank you for saving this entire city block without stopping your fire truck.
Look at him power slide around that turn. Yeah.
You spray the water down in front of you so it makes the drifting better. It's spraying up around you, and they're like, that is magnificent.
I actually was doing one firefighter mission where I had a wanted level, and I was putting out fires, and I did my power slide around a corner. There's a cop standing right in the apex of the hairpin, and all of a sudden he's like chasing after me. He's like, "Oh, stop!" And it's like, "Come on, dude! You just saw the most beautiful thing you're ever gonna see. You got to just give me a pass for those 10 people that I ran over on the previous turn."
He's like, he clipped me a little, but I can't even be mad. I remember I was playing GTA 3 once, and I was trying to do the ambulance missions.
Oh, those are hard.
And I was on I think it's the final ambulance mission, and it's back when I had a lot more time than I do now,
Yeah.
So I just keep trying and trying and trying. I was doing so good, and I was so impressed with myself, and then I came around a corner just as a cop car was wanting to turn, and we just sort of swapped paint on the side, and the wanted level just spiked, and I'm desperately trying to escape and trying to keep the person in the back alive, and then it ended up with me standing in an intersection with a bazooka, a complete wanted level. I'm protecting this ambulance, just shooting rockets into cop cars. I really had no exit strategy.
I never had that,
and it did not
trouble.
end well.
I never got into that situation with the ambulance. I got very far in it once and stopped to pick up a patient and was in the wrong neighborhood and ended up getting pulled out of the ambulance and beaten to death by one of the more nothing gangs in the game. It was like the Jamaicans who you do like 2 missions for, and then they decide they don't like you. And then you kind of forget about them because they're on the fringes of town in an area you never go to. And then I picked up a patient, and they're like, "Yeah, man, we remember you," and kicked me until I died a lot.
Remember very early in the game, there's a guy who's at I think it's the strip club, and you eventually have to kill him after doing missions for him. I kept having trouble with that mission because he kept getting away, and I finally got frustrated, and I parked a semi-truck across the alley he comes out of, and then I walked up the street with a sniper rifle, and if he bashes in the car enough that the AI gets confused, so it decides everyone should get out of the car and look for another car, and he stepped out of the car, and I just took his head clean off, and then they try to run after you, but there's a semi-truck in the way, and the AI doesn't know how to navigate that problem. So I just stood there sniper rifling them back, and they're just doing run animations against the side of the truck. Like, what is this truck? We don't understand this truck. How did he do this voodoo?
Yeah, that's actually one of the things that I really appreciate about GTA 3 versus a lot of the later games in the series is you have a ton of freedom on how to complete a mission. They might be like, well, here's where the guy's going to be, and I just happened to leave a machine gun laying nearby, but if you want to just go run him over with a car, that's fine. And if you want to set other people on fire and have them run around wildly until they bump into him and he starts on fire, that's fine too. The final mission of Vice City, you're fighting the other mafia that sent you down there. They come to collect the money from you, and you're fighting them like through your mansion. You're working your way up to the roof, and there's an epic rooftop battle. Well, I tried that twice, and it was hard. So the next time I hopped in a car, drove across town to where I had a helicopter, and then flew the helicopter back to the house and landed it on the roof, and snuck up behind everybody. So I can't, instead of going up through the house from the front door to the roof, went from the roof to the front door, and nobody was in a good hiding spot then. It was much easier. And those earlier GTA games really rewarded you for thinking outside the box like that. The newer ones, starting maybe with San Andreas, got a lot more rigid. I think maybe they thought that the games were too easy.
I can't argue against it. All that I have is like some of the jankiness with the graphics, but sometimes something's so good it can forgive. Like right now, just talking about this, I can picture areas that I liked driving in Grand Theft Auto 3. Like, I love driving down by the riverside where the dude with the doom buggies worked and gave you missions, and up by the airport with the bridge that would go up and down at the most inopportune times. Like when you have a bunch of cops behind you. Oh, this is the time we're going to raise the bridge.
I still remembered all my places that I'd found were good places to set up ambushes so that I could get a tank. There are certain areas where if you're inside a building or you have a roof over you where the helicopters can't, pick you to death, there's walls so the cops can't just steamroll you. You can kind of hide out there and throw grenades and kill cops for a while, and eventually they'll send tanks, and the tanks will get up to the wall, and then the soldiers will get out, and you can throw grenades and kill them and then drive off in the tank. And I'd remembered all the places that I'd found that were good places to do that. It was really surprising how much stuff just comes right back to you. That you don't really forget, how to get around town, where some of the hidden packages are, all the lyrics to Hot Tonight, just a lot of things deeply entrenched in the memory that came floating back up to the surface.
And now that you're on PC with it, you have console commands, so anytime you want a tank, you can just call one down from the sky.
Yeah, but that takes away from the joy of having a heroic last stand of you and a missile launcher versus an entire army of police.
Now, after I finished the game, I never used a cheat code in a Grand Theft Auto game until after I finished it. So after the story was done, all gloves were off. I was like, I'm going to make an airplane and combine it with a tank. You can't actually do that, but in my memory, I had an airplane tank. Well, I guess that was Head versus Heart, and we both agree Grand Theft Auto is 3 is still a great game. We're not sure about after that, although San Andreas did have that part where you had the jetpack and you were chasing a train. That was an exit from reality big time right there.
That was pretty great. 3's great. Vice City's still pretty good. San Andreas is fine. And 4 and 5 are garbage.
I'm Donald, this is Brad, and that's another episode of Cartridge Based Radio, where we only said the name of our podcast twice.
Yeah, we should definitely end on that because we want all our listeners to remember us as being terrible.
Outro music.